Welcome to Fighting Stats, the ultimate channel for MMA fans who love statistics and betting breakdowns. I'm your host, Art C, and I'm here to get you ready for the upcoming UFC fights. In this series, I'll be watching tape and providing my real-time analysis on how I think the fights are going to go. I'll be watching for fighters' strengths, weaknesses, tendencies, and overall strategies, pairing that with Fighting Stats' exclusive UFC stats not available anywhere else to give you a prediction on how I think the fights are going to go and ultimately who's going to win. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Fighting Stats. Welcome back to Fighting Stats. I'm your host, Artsy, and today we are breaking down the UFC 299 fight between Gilbert Burns and Jack Della Maddalena. This one is going out to our subscribers on patreon.com/fightingstats. I asked them what fights do they want to break down. This was at one of their top of the list, so we're breaking that down here. What we're going to do is first we're going to take a deep dive into the stats and the numbers, see what the numbers tell us. Then we've watched the fight tape on Burns. We've seen the fight tape of Jack Della Maddalena. I'm going to give you my prediction on how the fight will go. And then we're going to run the numbers. We're going to see if we can find the best bets. None of the props are out, so I'm going to give you my lines in terms of where I think the props should be. And then so when they do open, you can determine which ones have value. So let's get it started. Let's get into the breakdown here. We have Gilbert Burns on the blue side and the blue fighter, and we have Jack in the red side there. Tail of the tape, Jack's going to have a 1-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage. Jack does switch between orthodox and southpaw, whereas Gilbert Burns mainly strikes from orthodox. So Gilbert Burns in his UFC career is 15-6. Of those 15 wins, 20% of them are by KO, 33% by submission, and 47% of them by decision. Of his 6 losses, 33% coming from KO, 67% coming from decision there. So mostly the time, Gilbert Burns going to decision. Jack Della Maddalena is 6-0 in the UFC. 50% of his wins are from TKO, 17% by submission, and 33% by decision. And again, does not have an L in the UFC. Let's go down to Gilbert Burns' offensive striking. So 75% of Gilbert Burns' striking is going to be at a distance, 9% in the clinch, and 16% on the ground. Whereas his target breakdown, he goes towards the head 75% of the time, goes to the body 13% of the time, and then legs 12% of the time. Striking accuracy, about average here at 39%. Head strike accuracy, body strike accuracy pretty good at 77%, and leg accuracy again also at 79%. Average strikes thrown and landed by round. So in terms of throwing, he has 31 strikes in round 1, 36 in round 2, 32 in round 3, and then drops off a little bit into round 4, 24 in round 4, and then picks up a little bit in round 5 at 31. His strikes landed, though, about the same across the board, 15, 16, 16, 17, and 16, average of 16 strikes landed per round. And then you do see his knockdowns there, 2 knockdowns in round 1, 2 knockdowns in round 2, and none in the later rounds. So if he is going to find a knockdown, it's probably going to be in the earlier rounds. His strikes landed by body type. You do see him going to the head a little bit often, 2, 3, 9, 9, and 11 in terms of head strikes, drops off to 9. And then in the later rounds, when he's a little bit tired, the head strikes go down and the leg strikes go up a little bit. Maybe the cardio has an effect on that. So Gilbert Burns, a long career in the UFC, dating back to his first fight was in 2014. Only been knocked down 4 times in his UFC career. So worth noting there, overall significant strike accuracy at 52%. We talked about the leg and distance accuracies there as well. So Gilbert Burns has had 4 knockdowns. He knocked down Tyron Woodley, knocked down, that was Damian Maia. He knocked down Oven Mercier. So he does not have a knockdown since March of 2020. Worth noting there. On the defensive striking, let's pull up those numbers here. Defensive striking, 85% of his strikes against are going to be at a distance, 9% in the clinch, 6% on the ground. Distant target against, 77% towards the head, 15% towards the body, and 8% to the legs. So a little bit of a mix-up there. Head strike accuracy, 36%. Again, a pretty average there. 63% towards the body. And leg defense, not the greatest at 88%. Doesn't check a ton of leg kicks. Average strikes absorbed by rounds. Looks like it does go up as the rounds go on. A little bit more hittable as the rounds go up, especially in round 5 there. So 31. In terms of strikes landed, I'll go 13, 15, 17, 17, and then 24 in round number 5. And then when he does get knocked down, that looks like it's going to be in the earlier rounds. 3, 2, and 2 in rounds 2 and 3. And then 4 and 5 drop off to 0 there. So. And then strikes absorbed by round, again drop off in terms of head and arms, or head and leg there in the 5th round. So fought a couple of strikers here, fought a couple of defensive grapplers here. Overall in his career, been knocked down 7 times. We did see the knockdown. He did get knocked down against Chimaev. That was a jab. I do want to highlight this. He got knocked down by Chimaev, a jab in round number 1. He got knocked down by Usman in rounds 2 and 3. I think both of them coming from a jab as well. Belal Muhammad, it looked like a knockdown. They didn't count a knockdown here, so that also coming from a jab there as well. So that was twice there. Just wanted to highlight just the jab that is knocking down Gilbert Burns. But again, he does seem to be pretty durable, going to decision most of the times there. On the offensive striking here for Jack Della Maddalena here, 83% of his strikes are going to be at a distance, 11% of them are going to be in the clinch, and 6% on the ground. So he does go down to the ground and throw some ground strikes there. Target breakdown, 72% towards the head, 21% towards the body, and 7% to the leg. I do like how he mixes in the body strikes with the head strikes, multiple shot combos, body head, or body head sort of thing. Different combos that he likes to throw. Striking accuracy pretty good at 47%. Striking accuracy, body accuracy at 74, and leg accuracy at 81. Not a huge kicker, but he will throw some leg kicks here and there. Average strikes thrown by round and absorbed by round, landed by round seems to go up as the rounds go on. So maybe a little bit of a slower start, landing 27 strikes in round number 1, 31 in round number 2, and 37 in round number 3. Strikes thrown, big volume here, 51, 52, and 64 there. And you can see the head strikes by round as well. Does spike up in round number 3. So round number 3, you see his output sort of increase there. Over his UFC career, not many fights, but he does have 5 knockdowns. All 5 of those coming in early in his career. First fight there against Pete Rodriguez, knocked him down. Ramazan Ameev knocked him down with a body shot. Dropped Danny Roberts twice, and then Randy Brown knocked him down once. But since then, fought Basil Hafiz and Kevin Holland. No knockdowns in those 2 fights. We saw some ground strikes. I wonder where those ground strikes came from. Pete Rodriguez, Ameev. Okay, so this is after the knockdown. Pete Rodriguez gets the knockdown, and then he follows up with some ground and pound. So he has 3 strikes there, 4 strikes against Ameev on the ground, 4 against Danny Roberts, and 7 against Randy Brown there as well. Most of that coming from ground and pound. He's not actively looking for the grappling, but we'll get into the grappling very shortly. So red, defensive striking. So this is Jack, defensive striking. Most of his strikes absorbed are going to be from the distance. 6% in the clinch, has not taken a strike on the ground. 78% of his strikes against are towards the head, 13 towards the body, and 9% towards the leg. Look at this defensive striking. His head strike accuracy, very good. 23% defensive striking, 55% towards the body, 84% towards the leg. So good stuff there. Average strikes absorbed by rounds does spike up here a little bit. 51 strikes thrown, 92 in round 2, and 79 in round 3. Does drive a pace, so these numbers are a little bit high. 16 absorbed in round number 1, 33 absorbed in round number 2, and 23 in round number 3. Has not been knocked down yet in his UFC career. Significant strikes overall. His defense, 29% striking defense. So again, pretty good. He does keep a nice high guard. A lot of that stuff hitting the guard or moving back. So that's what we saw in the tape. The numbers seem to align with that. So let's move over to the grappling. Here's going to be the difference here in my mind in terms of how the fight's going to go. We're going to first start with Gilbert Burns' offensive grappling. We see his takedown attempts by round here. So 1.9 takedown attempts in round number 1, 1.7 in round number 2, drops off a little bit, 1.3 in round number 3, then 2 and 2.5 in rounds 4 and 5. Successful takedowns hovering around 0.8 in round 1, 0.6 in round 2, 0.5 in rounds 3 and 4 as well. So 50% takedown accuracy so far, and then does have submission attempts as well. Control numbers there as well. So let's see, go deep into the numbers here. So one thing I did want to highlight, and we'll go into the breakdown a little bit further, but Belal Muhammad, great takedown defense, goes 0-3, 0-4 in takedowns, loses that fight. Jorge Masvidal goes 4-4-6 in takedowns, wins that fight. Neil Magny goes 1-for-1 in that fight, wins that fight. Khamzat Chimaev goes 0-5 in that fight, loses that fight. Stephen Boyd Thompson, he goes 3-for-6 in that fight, wins that fight. Kamaru Usman 0-for-3 in that fight, loses that fight. You see a pattern here? Tyron Woodley goes 2-for-4, 2-for-8 in that takedown in that fight, wins that fight. So in these fights here, he's fighting some guys with some great takedown defense. Obviously, losing those grappling exchanges, ended up losing those fights. So I did want to highlight those in terms of what the numbers said there. Defensive grappling, I'm not going to go too much into it. I don't see Jack really defensively grappling, going for any takedowns here. You can see historically, Gilbert Burns' a long UFC career, only 23 takedown attempts against. 12 of them have been successful, so decent takedown attempts. Really, nobody wants to go to the ground with Gilbert Burns. This is what we wanted to look at here. Offensive grappling, sorry, not offensive grappling for Jack. We wanted defensive grappling for Jack. We don't care offensively. He's not going to shoot. The numbers show it to us here in his UFC career. Only attempted 2 takedowns. One of them have been successful. Not really looking to grapple at all. 132 seconds of control time in his UFC career. Red, defensive grappling. Here's what we wanted to look at here. So takedowns against, he averages 1.3 takedowns attempted against, 4 in round 2 and 4.5 in round 3. That just goes to show you that some of these guys, when they're fighting Jack, they do want to try to get the takedowns there. But he is not allowed a takedown in rounds 2 or 3, allowed 0.7 takedowns on average in round number 1. So decent numbers there. And then the control time here. So wanted to go over the numbers. In his UFC career, has seen 25 takedown attempts against. Only 4 of them have been successful. But I do want to point out who's taken them down. Basel Hafez, just skewing these numbers completely. 20 takedowns attempts for Hafez, landed 3 of them in round number 1, actually winning that round 1 against Jack, coming in on short notice and up a weight class, I believe, and then Basel Hafez actually slowing down cardio-wise, losing rounds 2 and 3. Holland attempted 2, but it's Kevin Holland. They're sort of not really great. Ramazan Aziz goes 1-for-2 in takedown attempts again as well. Pete Rodriguez, Danny Robert, Randy Brown, not really grapplers, so worth noting that in terms of the numbers. Again, that Basel Hafez fight skewing some of the numbers there. So that's what the numbers say. We are going to sort of pin our hat on the takedown defense here of Jack Della Maddalena. I think it really tells a story, especially on the Gilbert Burns side, knowing that when he doesn't get the takedowns, he seems to struggle, tends to lose those fights, and then when he does get the takedowns, he's able to control them and win those fights. So that's going to be a theme here in the breakdown. Let's run through the numbers. Because this fight is a little bit a ways away, we don't have all of the stats in terms of our fighting stats. We do have the Basel Hafez fight here for Jack. 69% of that fight was spent standing. A lot of that fight here defending takedowns, and 19% of that was on the ground there as well. Striking tendencies, I'll just highlight a little bit here for Jack. 50% of his strikes were single strikes. That means 50% of them were combos, so decent number of combos thrown by Jack. 13% of his strikes were big kicks. 18% overall is going to be jabs. So he does like the jab. You see 70% of the jab, 15% the straight 2, 10% of the time he's throwing that 1-2, and then he will throw that rear leg kick as well, but 6% of the time, double jab 4% of the time, and the rest is not really noticeable. So let's go into the breakdown. We did tape all of the Gilbert Burns side. We take the Jack Della Maddalena side. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go into the grappling, because that's where I'm going to really pinpoint this breakdown. It's going to come into the grappling. So we're going to go through some of the numbers again. We did talk about it. Again, Bilal Muhammad, great takedown defense, able to keep the fight standing. He has to strike for that time. Bilal Muhammad ends up winning a unanimous decision there. Jorge Masvidal, more of a striker, not able to keep the fight standing. Gilbert Burns able to take him down, control him there. Had 245 seconds of control time in round number 2, 90 seconds of control time in round number 3. Didn't really shoot for a takedown in round number 1. That round number 1 was very slow paced, but Gilbert Burns ends up finding the decision win. Submits Neil Magny, arm triangle in first round after a 155 in control time in round 1 there. And then same thing with Chimaev. Chimaev's a beast. He's going to keep every fight standing there. 0 takedowns for Gilbert Burns. No control time for Gilbert Burns there. Ends up losing that fight. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, one of those strikers. Again, great, decent takedown defense. Everybody tries to take him down. Gilbert Burns able to take him down there. Over 400 seconds of control time over the fight. Gilbert Burns actually able to win a decision there as well. And then Kamaru Usman, same sort of thing. I did want to highlight, but it's more important to me, and this is why the numbers and sort of how I'm going to pick a side. Tyron Woodley's mostly a power striker there, does give up a bunch of takedowns, over 400 seconds of control time in that fight as well. So we do see a pattern. Again, when Gilbert Burns is able to get the takedowns, he's able to control his opponent. He's a third-degree black belt on the ground, so it's going to be very hard to, one, get up from under Gilbert Burns, and two, you have to survive the submission. Like, Gilbert Burns doesn't have a ton of submissions recently. You see his submission attempts here, really only has the one submission attempt against Neil Magny, one in round 4 against Tyron Woodley, one in round 2 against Gunnar Nelson. But for a high-level grappler like Gilbert Burns, hasn't been able to get his grappling off too much. Again, a couple of those guys not able to get the fight down to the ground. But when it was down to the ground, Gilbert Burns performing more position over submission, really keeping guys underneath him, racking up the control time like we've seen. So the reason I bring it up again is, again, we go into Jack Della Maddalena. I think the fight is going to be dependent on the takedown here. You might have a good live bet spot, honestly. If Gilbert Burns shoots for that takedown early, gets it, then I'm going to think that Gilbert Burns probably wins the fight. If he can't get the takedown or really struggles for it and Jack keeps the fight standing, it'd probably be a Jack fight. What we saw in the fight tape from Jack, very good hands, really mixing up southpaw orthodox head to the body, nice elbows, nice kicks, very well-rounded striker, very good defense as well. We saw that in the striking accuracy numbers there as well. So on the feet there, I don't think it's comparable. I mean, Gilbert Burns is competitive. He likes to throw a lot of overhand rights. I like the right hand that he throws, stepping into southpaw and then a double right. You don't really see a lot of double rights that he throws, but he is able to land that. He does have some nice outside low kicks, a nice jab, and his 1-2 is very long, so he can land that. However, again, just the striking defense of Jack probably favors him in a 3-fight stand-up fight. However, I do want to go into the threat of the takedown. So when you are fighting Gilbert Burns, it sort of takes away some of the shot selection that you can really throw at Gilbert Burns. One, you're not going to throw a lot of high kicks because you're afraid of him catching the kick and getting taken down. Not that Jack's a huge kicker anyway, but those kicks, sort of, he does have to think about throwing those kicks, and he sort of low kicks as well. Burns can reach down and get the takedown from there. I'm going to say that the grappling here of Jack Della Maddalena, very questionable, and I think that a lot of people are going to see recency bias. Jack's going to keep the fight standing. Kevin Holland's not going to want to get the fight down to the ground, so it goes 3 rounds with Kevin Holland. Basil Hafez, he nullifies some of the grappling, but again, that was short notice for Hafez. UFC debut for Hafez, and I think he was up a weight class as well, and you saw Hafez win round number 1 because of the grappling, and then his cardio sort of fall off. He was able to survive all 3 rounds, but you can visibly see Hafez slowing down, the takedowns coming a lot slower and harder in rounds 2 and 3, losing 2 and 3 and losing a decision there. We saw in the Ramazan Aziz fight again, he got the takedown early there as well. I think he had him in like an anaconda choke. Jack has to sort of breathe out of it. Very close to submitting Jack Della Maddalena by anaconda, Aziz was. And even in the Contender Series fight, it's not here, but Contender Series fight, Jack Della Maddalena, it was against Ange Lusa. Lusa had him deep in an arm triangle attempt. Jack sort of wincing and trying to get out of that, basically surviving. But Lusa and Ameev, they got him deep into submissions. They're nowhere near the level of Gilbert Burns in terms of submission. So get Gilbert Burns into that arm triangle, he's not getting out. Gilbert Burns in that anaconda, he's not getting out. So sort of a beneficial strength of schedule for Jack. Taking Pete Rodriguez really shouldn't be in the UFC. Danny Roberts, Randy Brown was a good win. Randy Brown very long and got, clipped him there. Ended up submitting him, but he did knock him down, could have finished him. The ref could have stopped that. Finds the rear naked choke for Randy Brown. So the sample size is just not big enough for Jack Della Maddalena on the ground. I just haven't, in terms of his offensive grappling, I didn't really like what I saw letting his opponents up in terms of when he does get them down to the ground. Defensively, we didn't see much, but from the round 1 against Basil Hafez, didn't really do much off of his back. I I think he had to get up there in round one, but Hafez landed multiple takedowns, able to get that there. So I just think the grappling of Gilbert Burns is on another level. Gilbert Burns does a really good job of timing the takedowns. It's not all technique and it's not all power, but Gilbert Burns will stand there, jab with you. He will wait for you to commit. You can go back to the Wonderboy Thompson fight. Wonderboy Thompson doesn't really like to commit on strikes, so you see Gilbert Burns waiting there on the outside a little bit. As soon as Thompson comes forward and throws a 1-2, that's when Gilbert Burns is level changing. He has a very nice level change into a double leg, get you down to the ground. The problem with Jack Della Maddalena is, I talked about this, 50% of his strikes are single strikes, 50% of his strikes are combos as well. That means he's throwing multi-strike combos. He goes body, body, head, head. He throws this high guard up that he keeps up high. I think we saw it in the Amir fight there. Go back, sorry, not in the Amir, the Hafez fight in round number 2. Go back and watch that fight tape. You see Maddalena using the high guard and really dropping his head low to try to stop the takedown. I think the takedown's there if Burns wants to level change. I think if Jack really loads up on some of the strikes that he does, he throws a lot of like these wider hooks, and he does sit down into long punch combos as well. I think it's conducive to a Gilbert Burns level change. And then I think if Gilbert Burns, all he needs is one takedown to win the round. So he gets on top. He rides top control. He might not submit him. He might get him in danger. The submission's always live for Gilbert Burns. You've seen Jack try to fight out a submission, so submission's definitely live for Gilbert Burns. But I think the top time is also live for Gilbert Burns. If he's not going to find the submission, he's going to ride out top time. It's going to be a little bit, you might find Gilbert Burns on the back a little bit, both hooks in sort of thing, body triangle sort of thing. We just haven't seen Jack face a grappler. And for me to stand there and say, I'm confident that Jack will keep it standing, pop the jab on the outside, I just can't say that. The guys that are beating Gilbert Burns, Chimaev, Usman, and Bilal Muhammad, those are some of the top defensive grapplers. I just don't see that in Jack's side. So I think Gilbert Burns has more ways to win. Through the grappling, I think he can make it dirty. On the feet, he's not a fish out of water. He can throw some big strikes. Jack does have a chin, so it's going to be hard to knock out Jack Della Maddalena on the feet. But if it does come, it could come from TKO, things like that. So let's get deep into the numbers. I'm going to sort of give you my percentages on where the numbers are going to go, and then we'll go from there. All right, guys, well, that is it for today. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this type of content, make sure you smash the like button, hit the subscribe. You'll get notified anytime we put out new content. Listen to this. We just hit a massive parlay for $29,000 at UFC 297. That is one UFC after 296 where we hit a parlay for $82,000. That's back-to-back parlays. We've made $110,000. And how do we do it? We use our exclusive fighting stats. Not available anywhere else. Our exclusive fighting stats gives us information, gives us a big edge over the sportsbooks, and tell us what's going to happen within the fights. We post all that information, our breakdowns, our best bets, over at patreon.com/fightingstats. Don't miss out. Make sure you subscribe today. Again, my name is Art C. This is Fighting Stats. Thanks for watching.